No one heard the order when it was given. There was no announcement, no ceremony, no official stamp. It was spoken quietly in a room where the curtains were always drawn, where maps were pinned and unpinned so often the walls had begun to tear. The men in that room understood something most soldiers never would. This mission could never be acknowledged. If it failed, it wouldn't just cost lives. It would shatter the fragile trust holding the Allied forces together. And if it succeeded, it would raise a question no one wanted to answer. How far is too far when winning a war depends on deception? By 1943, World War II had reached a moment of brutal uncertainty. Germany was no longer unstoppable, but it was far from defeated. On the Eastern Front, blood soaked the snow as entire armies vanished into the cold. In North Africa, the desert swallowed men and machines. In the skies, bombers carved paths of fire across ancient cities. Every side knew the next major move could determine whether the war dragged on for years or finally began to turn. The Allies needed to strike Europe, but where they struck mattered more than how hard. Germany expected an invasion. That much was certain. Hitler was obsessed with it, demanding reports daily, sometimes hourly. He wanted to know where the blow would fall. His generals feared him more than they trusted one another, and that fear filtered down through the entire command structure. Any intelligence that appeared solid, official, and precise was treated like gold. This is where British intelligence noticed something important. German spies were skilled, but cautious. They valued documents over rumors, papers over whispers. They believed a stamped order carried more truth than 1,000 intercepted conversations. So, if the Allies could place believable documents directly into German hands, they could shape enemy decisions without firing a single shot. The idea itself felt absurd at first. Too theatrical, too fragile. But as planners explored it, the logic became disturbingly clear. Germany was watching coastlines, monitoring ports, and tracking troop movements. What it could honestly verify was intent. Intent lived on paper, and intent could be forged. The problem was delivery. A living agent risked capture and interrogation. Radio transmissions could be traced. The message needed to arrive naturally, without suspicion. And that was when someone suggested the unthinkable. What if the message arrived with a body? Not just any body. A body that told a story all on its own. A body that could never contradict the narrative being built around it. A body that, by its very silence, made the lie stronger. The search began quietly. Intelligence officers scoured records, hospitals, morgues. They needed someone who would not be missed, whose death would not raise questions. Weeks passed before they found him. A man who had lived on the margins, whose life had already slipped through the cracks of society. When he died, there was no funeral, no grieving relatives demanding explanations, just paperwork and silence. That silence would be repurposed. They gave him a new identity, not hastily, but with obsessive attention to detail. He was no longer a nameless man. He was a British officer, with a rank appropriate enough to carry sensitive documents but not so high as to invite excessive scrutiny. He had a personality constructed from habits, preferences, and small imperfections. His pockets were filled with items meant to suggest an ordinary life interrupted by war. A letter from a woman waiting for him, a receipt from a club he supposedly visited, keys to a place he never lived in. Each item was carefully chosen, worn slightly aged, just enough to feel handled rather than planted. The most important item, however, was secured to him in a briefcase. Inside were documents marked confidential, outlining Allied plans in meticulous detail. They spoke of troop movements, landing zones, supply routes. Everything about them was convincing. Everything except the truth. The invasion described would never happen. Spain was chosen deliberately, officially neutral, but unofficially porous. German agents operated there openly, bribing officials, cultivating informants, and watching ports. British intelligence knew that anything discovered by Spanish authorities would inevitably find its way to Berlin. The body was released into the sea at precisely the right location, at precisely the right time, carried by currents calculated to deliver it gently to shore. When it was found, events unfolded exactly as predicted. The body was recovered. The documents were catalogued, and quietly, discreetly, German intelligence was allowed to examine everything. They photographed the papers, copied them, analyzed every word. The personal effects convinced them this was no fabrication. The letters felt intimate. The story felt real. The tragedy of an officer lost at sea fit perfectly into the chaos of war. In Berlin, analysts pored over the intelligence. Hitler was briefed. He read the documents himself. The plans confirmed his existing fears while guiding them in a specific direction. The Allies, it seemed, were preparing to strike southern Europe, aiming for areas Germany believed were vulnerable. Orders were given. Divisions were redeployed. Coastal defenses were reinforced in the wrong places. Entire units were held back, waiting for an invasion that would never come. Meanwhile, the real invasion force assembled elsewhere, unnoticed and unchallenged. When Allied troops finally landed in Sicily, they encountered resistance, but far less than expected. German defenses were stretched thin, commanders confused by conflicting reports. The window created by deception saved thousands of lives. The mission succeeded beyond its creator's hopes, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it vanished. No announcements were made. No reports were published. The files were sealed, buried under layers of classifications so dense that even senior officials were denied access. On the surface, this made little sense. The operation had been a masterpiece of intelligence warfare. Why not celebrate it? Why not teach it? Because its success raised questions no one wanted to confront. The man used in the mission had never consented. His death had been transformed into a weapon, his identity erased, rewritten, and used to manipulate the course of history. The Allies had crossed the line, and they knew it. Not because the enemy suffered, but because the method worked too well. What if such deception was used again? Not against enemies, but against allies. What if fabricated truth became standard practice? There were also practical concerns. The mission relied on an extraordinary chain of assumptions going perfectly. That the body would be found, that the documents would be examined, that German intelligence would believe them. One error, one curious official, one skeptical analyst, and the entire plan would have collapsed. Worse, it could have exposed Allied intelligence methods and handed Germany a massive propaganda victory. So the safest course was silence. For decades, the public never knew. Textbooks spoke of bravery, strategy, and sacrifice. They did not speak of lies carefully constructed from the life of a man who had never known he would matter. When the files were finally declassified, historians were stunned. The margins of error were razor thin. The operation succeeded not because it was flawless, but because human psychology behaved exactly as anticipated. Authority was trusted. Paper was believed. Details overwhelmed doubt. The revelation sparked a debate that continues to this day. Was the mission justified? Did the end justify the means? Is it acceptable to manipulate truth if it saves lives? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, if this worked once, how often has it been done since? The war ended, cities rebuilt, borders redrawn, but the methods developed in those shadowed rooms did not disappear. They evolve. Intelligence agencies studied the mission not as a relic of history, but as a template. Deception became more sophisticated. Stories became weapons. Reality became something that could be bent, shaped, and deployed. The man at the center of it all remained largely anonymous. His real name appeared only in footnotes. If at all, there was no monument for him, no acknowledgement of his role. His contribution existed only in sealed files and whispered conversations among those who understood the weight of what had been done. World War II is remembered as a clash of steel and fire, of armies and ideology, but beneath that noise ran a quieter current, one that proved information could be deadlier than bombs, and belief more powerful than bullets. This mission, hidden for 50 years, revealed that the battlefield extended far beyond trenches and skies. It reached into the human mind, into the assumptions people make when faced with something that appears official, personal, and real. The truth is uncomfortable. Victory was not achieved by strength alone. It was shaped by illusion, by the careful construction of a lie so convincing it moved armies. And once that door was opened, it could never truly be closed again. History often echoes louder in what it chooses to hide than in what it proudly displays. This mission remained classified not because it failed, but because it succeeded in a way that changed how wars could be fought forever. And even now, as the documents sit open on archival tables, their pages yellowed with age. The question lingers like a shadow that refuses to fade. If belief can be manufactured, if truth can be engineered, then the real legacy of that secret mission is not just a victory won, but a warning left behind. Because wars end, but the methods we accept during them have a way of echoing long after the last shot is fired. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, be sure to subscribe for more hidden histories.